Out of the vast inventory of all of the things that you own, what is one thing that you could have survived this past week without? Talk about that just a minute. Last week we discussed a strategy to find order brought by God into the midst of the chaos in which we often live. As a reminder, that was to remember that we do live in the presence of God. You were encouraged to find a place of quiet, a place of rest, a place where you could retreat from the busyness of life and just be still and know that I'm God. This week we're going to discuss a second strategy. I want you to spend a moment looking over your day with gratitude. Chances are you probably said you could have survived without most of what you own during this past week. We're surrounded by so much. We have so much excess. Paul wrote a letter to the church in Rome. As he begins, he lists the sins that the culture fell into and then warns Christians there in Rome that they too could fall into the same traps, that they could be pulled into the chaos of society, the chaos of their culture. Paul tells the church that they were fooled by Satan. He tells the Christians that they once knew God, but Satan had come in and Satan had lied to them. And they believed Satan's lie, and they suppressed the truth by their own wickedness. He points mainly to two causes that lie at the core of their journey downward. I want you to pause for just a moment and read together Romans 1, verses 18 to 25. Verse 22 tells us exactly where the people got off track. 1, they failed to glorify God as God. And then secondly, they failed to give thanks. And because of that, they were pulled into their own wickedness. Consider your own chaos. Consider your own life. Whatever problem you might be focusing on right now as your chaotic moment, you can see through all this chaos and you can find a way to glorify God. You can find a way to bless, to thank God for the blessings that He brings to your life. During a very dark time when Beth and I were navigating through the almost impossible task of caretaking for two sets of parents, during that time with my own diagnosis of cancer and then going through a very difficult surgery, a longtime friend of mine named Mike called me one day and said that he was about to enter into a time of prayer. And he said, I want to know specifically how I might pray for you. I told him, I said, well, don't pray for a healing because I don't know how to navigate the theological waters when God chooses not to answer a prayer. So let's make this simple because I didn't know if a healing was even possible. But after giving it a little bit of thought, I told Mike, I said, I want you to pray that God will take this time of chaos, this time in my life that seems to be so difficult, and I want Him to bring ministry from it. You know, God is still answering that prayer today, and part of even this series is brought from the ministry that God brought out of that chaos. That prayer was indeed answered. So as I look back on that as perhaps a chaotic and dark time, I see it as one of the most blessed times in my life because it brought some things into very clear focus for me. Bottom line, I'm blessed. And I was blessed then. So I want you to think about your own chaos right now. I want you to think about your own problem. What is the most difficult thing you are navigating through in your life right now? And I want you to talk as a group about how you might use this as an opportunity to glorify God. Where are God's blessings in the midst of your storm, in your moments of disorder and chaos? Where do you see the face of God? Let's pause and talk about that. Second part of the formula that Paul offers to the Roman church is The people who were trapped by their chaos and trapped by their sin just failed to give thanks. They forgot to pause and inventory what they have. In the very beginning, I asked you to think of, from your inventory of all of the things that you have, what could you have lived without? Probably most of what you have, because your survival is not reliant on those things you have around you. But we tend to take so much of what we have in our life for granted. So for the second part of our discussion, I want you to think, on your absolute worst day, imagine the worst day you've had this past week or maybe even this past year. What blessings were right there in front of you that you just somehow overlooked and you forgot to thank God? What opportunity for thanking God and to live a life of appreciation did you overlook or neglect? What is one thing that you failed to give God thanks for today? Talk about that as a group. All right, as a final activity for today, as you enter into a prayer time before you dismiss tonight, make a thankful prayer list. You might go around the room, or those that would like to contribute to this, let each person express something for which they're deeply thankful. And then pray a prayer of thanks to God for those things in our life that are a real blessing. Then you can close out with a time of prayer for specific needs within the group too.